Chairman, thank you. Thank you for bringing us here today. Thank you for your kind words as well. Let me begin by welcoming our nominee, his wife Marlon, and their children Kate and McKenna to what's a very important hearing. Mr. Pruitt, this past Sunday morning, I rose at dawn. I went for a long run. It took me through a beautiful state park in the northern part of Delaware. I reached the park at sunrise just as the sun was coming up and the sky was turning a brilliant blue. The winter air was crisp and clear. Wildlife was all around. In a word, it was perfect. As I ran, I said a prayer of thanksgiving for the gift of this moment. Later that morning, my wife and I went to church, and there we joined our congregation in singing a hymn that began with these words: "For the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise." Those words filled my heart with emotion then, and they do so again this morning. In a little more than 48 hours, Donald Trump will place his hand on a Bible. He'll take an oath to defend our country and Constitution. That Bible reminds us repeatedly to love our neighbors as ourselves, and it answers the question, who is my neighbor? Also found in those pages are scores of admonitions about another obligation that those of us who live on this earth are expected to meet. Simply put, we're to serve as stewards of this planet. I believe that we have a moral obligation to do so. A great many of my colleagues in the Senate agree, and so do most Americans. We need to be convinced that you embrace it as well, not just with your words, but with your deeds. Much of your record suggests otherwise. And today and in the days that follow, we need to find out where the truth lies. Leading the Environmental Protection Agency is hard work. That agency, created by President Richard Nixon and a bipartisan Congress 46 years ago, is tasked with implementing our nation's most important clean air, clean water, and safe chemical laws. The EPA is required to use sound science to protect both our environment and our public health. By and large, the EPA has done this successfully for decades while our economy has continued to grow. Many in this room today may not remember a time before the EPA, a time when states had to work individually to protect citizens in the community in which they lived, a time before the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act were signed into law, a time when businesses operating throughout the U.S. were faced with a myriad of conflicting state and local laws affecting our health and our environment. The choking smog and soot a half-century ago seem unfathomable now. Rivers on fire and deadly toxic plumes sound like something from another world, impossible in our United States of America. Today we have the luxury of largely forgetting these frightening circumstances thanks to the efforts of the Environmental Protection Agency, its employees, in partnership with state and local agencies and with companies across America. In fact, the EPA and its many partners throughout this country have been so successful that it's easy for some of us to forget just why this agency is so critical. And for some, it's also easy to presume that there's not much more for the agency to do, and that just could not be further from the truth. The environmental threats that we face today are real, and they don't respect state boundaries. And as we consider a nominee to run our nation's foremost environmental agency, it's worth reminding everyone here why the mission of the EPA is so critical and just what is at stake. Over time, my state of Delaware has made great strides in cleaning up our own air pollution, but our work only goes so far. Delaware, like many states on the East Coast, sits at the end of what is known as America's tailpipe. 90% of the air pollution in Delaware comes from outside of the first state, from power plants hundreds of miles away in places like Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, and across the Midwest. As governor of Delaware, if I had eliminated every source of air pollution within my state, stopped every combustion source, and ordered every motor vehicle off the roads, Delaware would still have faced deadly doses of air pollution. Should children and others in Delaware really be forced to live with the consequences of decisions made by polluters hundreds or even thousands of miles away who gain economically from our disadvantage? I don't think so. Fortunately, the EPA has recently implemented something called the Good Neighbor Rule to make sure that all states do their fair share to clean up the air. Every citizen in this country has a right to breathe clean air, regardless of whether they're in a downwind or an upwind state. That is why we have the EPA. I remember fishing as a boy with my dad along the Dan River near my hometown of Danville, Virginia. We brought home the fish that we caught to eat, and my mom and sister ate them as well. Today, that quintessential American pastime comes with a warning label. That river, along with countless other polluted streams, rivers, and lakes in all 50 states, are subject to public health advisories cautioning citizens against eating the mercury-laden fish found in them. We've known for decades that most of the mercury in our fish come from air pollution that's emitted from the dirtiest coal plants and then settles in our waterways. We also know that mercury is a powerful neurotoxin that accumulates in the human body over time, threatening the health of this environment in this generation and for generations to come. The EPA recently issued public health protections to clean up the toxic air pollution from our dirtiest coal plants, allowing families in Delaware and thousands of other communities to once again eat the fish from our rivers, our lakes, our streams without concern of mercury poisoning. That's why we have the EPA. Too often when state and local communities are pinched for cash, they try to save money by shortchanging clean air and clean water protections. Improvements to water infrastructure are oftentimes ignored. Corners are cut. Solutions are adopted that may save dollars now but inflict costly and unnecessary damage later. As we've seen most recently in the city of Flint, Michigan, these cuts can have a terrible, even a tragic impact on the health of the most vulnerable in our society, especially the youngest among us. Today, the citizens of Flint still lack clean drinking water, and the new generation there, which has been exposed to high levels of lead, faces an uncertain future. That's why we have the EPA. You may not know it, Mr. Pruitt, but Delaware is the lowest lying state in our nation. The highest point in Delaware is a bridge. Back home, the reality that our climate is changing is not up for grabs or up for debate. Families and business owners face the stark reality of climate change every single day. And tackling that challenge is not just the right thing to do, what is best for Delaware's economy. It is a matter of survival. Take a ride with me sometime, some 30 miles south of Dover Air Force Base, heading east toward the Delaware Bay on Prime Hook Road, and you'll see what I mean. There was a time not long ago when just before you reached the Delaware Bay, you came to a parking lot. Today, that parking lot is underwater. Stand there with me looking to the east, and you'll see part of a concrete bunker stepping up out of the water about 1 o'clock. Recently, someone showed me a photo taken of that bunker in 1947, the year I was born. It was on dry land, 500 feet west of the water's edge, 500 feet west. But our little state alone cannot stem the flow of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere that's largely causing our climate to change, our seas to rise, and our coastline to retreat. Every state must do its fair share to safeguard our climate and their neighbors. That is why we have the EPA. Examples of air and water pollution produced by one state and fouling the air and water of others can still be found in too many parts of America, like the runoff from Pennsylvania that degrades the waters of the Chesapeake Bay, or the haze exported from other states that oftentimes shrouds the Smoky Mountains and degrades visibility at the Grand Canyon. That's why we have the EPA. And some of my colleagues describe me as recovering governor. For the most part, I believe that governors and presidents deserve deference in picking the members of their leadership teams, and as a result, I've given presidents of both parties that deference in most instances. Since coming to the Senate in 2001, I've opposed only one of the nominees for EP administrator, supporting 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats nominees. Subsequently, every EPA administrator I've supported demonstrated clearly that they were committed to furthering the overall mission of the EPA, protecting human health and our environment. I'm also committed to a full and fair confirmation process with respect to our nominations that this President-elect has offered too. And having said that, though, I've shared with Mr. Pruitt, and I'll share with my colleagues today, that too much of what I've seen of his record of the environment and his views about the role of EPA are troubling, and in some cases, deeply troubling. Even former Republican administrator, EPA Administrator Christy Whitman, with whom I served for 7 years as governor of neighboring states, recently said that she can't, and I quote, "She can't recall ever having seen an appointment of someone who was so disdainful of the agency and the science behind what the agency does." Let me conclude with this. It's hard to imagine a more damning statement, and from one who served not long ago in that position of trust. Mr. Pruitt, to which you've been nominated. Today is your opportunity to show that she's gotten it wrong. To be honest with you, coming to this hearing today, I fear that she's gotten it right. Thank you.